Welcome to Conversations with Shlomo.
Hi, I'm Shlomo, your host. I've discovered that vulnerable conversations lead to some of my richest insights and personal growth experiences. So join me as I sit down with guests who inspire me, and let's explore our ups, downs, and everything in between.
Enjoy listening.
Okay, hi Ezzy. Today I'm sitting here with my good friend, definitely an inspiration, and a colleague, my friend Ezzy Schusterman from Northern California. And I want to welcome you to the podcast. And we're looking forward to having a good and meaningful conversation. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
If we can jump right into it. First of all, what do you do today? Who are you today? If somebody were to ask, hey, Ezzy, what do you do?
So I'm a shliach in Northern California, and my wife and I have been running the Northern California branch of the Friendship Circle for the past 19 years. About 10 years into running that, we started a Chabad house in Los Altos, California, near Palo Alto. And recently, I got my MSW and started counseling people, and I'm getting licensed in California, and that's what I do.
Okay. And where did the story begin? You didn't grow up in Northern California. I think most people know the Schusterman family. So where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Long Beach, California, and lived there till I was 17. My mother passed away when I was 7, and that shaped a lot of my life. And later on, my family moved to Los Angeles, and I lived there while being in yeshiva and kind of being around, and then eventually did the regular circuit, went to yeshiva different places, ended up in Crown Heights, got married, and moved 19 years ago to Northern California.
I didn't realize that you were 17 when you left Long Beach. I felt like you were much younger.
I left when I was 13. I went to yeshiva. So essentially, I left Long Beach when I was 13.
But your family lived?
My family lived there till I was 17.
Mm.
I think they left for a year before, maybe when I was 16, but they ultimately moved to LA when I was 17. But 13, I began the yeshiva circuit. So I was in yeshiva all week. I would come home for Shabbos.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a new life at that point.
Where are you in your family in terms of placement?
So I'm the middle of 11. 4 older brothers and older sister, and 3 younger sisters, 2 younger brothers.
So you're like literally
the middle child, with all the middle child syndromes and all that stuff. You know, people think a middle child is 3 kids. You got the middle child. 11 kids, you have a middle child too. You have maybe multiple middle children.
But I'm sure we're going to get a little bit into it. But do you remember life before your mother passed away?
You know, as much as a 7-year-old can remember. Life before my mother passed away, and I would say even after in many ways, I was always a happy-go-lucky kid. Life was great. I didn't stress out too much. You know, life was fun. And life was good. I mean, you know, after my mother passed away and when I got older, you kind of understand what life was for her, being away for being on shlichus. But for me, I was a kid, and it was fun. I had friends, and in school we had some frum friends, some secular friends. So I had a decent crowd, decent group of people to hang out with and to spend time with growing up. And so my childhood in that regard was great. Only as I got older did I realize all the impacts of, losing my mother. Maybe when I was 13 years old, around then did I realize that. But being as a kid, it was life in Long Beach was great. It was fun. The shul was fun. We had great teachers and did a lot of fun trips, and it was just a great, easygoing stage in Long Beach.
You went to Long Beach Academy in Huntington Beach?
Hebrew Academy. Yeah.
Hebrew Academy, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And at the time it was thriving, and there was lots of kids there.
Yeah, and there was tons of kids.
Mm-hmm.
My grade was, I think, the first class that had, I think it was 30 kids, if I'm not mistaken, and we had probably 10 from kids. So there was a decent crowd. And years afterwards, I mean, there were a lot more kids. But before that, there was most of the kids were going to LA for school.
Mm-hmm.
But my class was like the first film class.
You're bring me into the time, if it's okay, when you're 7 years old. Your mother passed away suddenly or after some illness?
So interesting is that today happens to be my mother's yard site, her 39th yard site.
That's why you're in town.
That's why I'm in town. I'm here for other reasons as well, but that's why I'm here. And it was a Sunday. My mother played piano, and she was playing music for the school Pesach play, I guess is what to call it. And there was no indications before of anything not being well, and she came home and said she wasn't feeling well. She ultimately ended up going to the hospital and just passed away pretty suddenly. She had a heart attack, and I think at 7 years old you don't fully comprehend what that means. I don't think anybody can really process what it's like to go from you know day to day, and in many ways I blocked out a lot of it. Um, but yeah, it was a sudden passing, and that really set my life on for the next 39 years. That's where I am today,
So
39 years later.
11 kids at home, comes home not feeling well, and that goes to the hospital and unfortunately passes away. How did you find out about it?
So my father told us, he went to the hospital and he had suddenly this, she passed away there, and it couldn't have been more than 2, 3 hours. I remember, you remember different things. I remember it was light outside, so between 12 and 6, it's 6 hours, maybe 7. So it's not a long time. So he didn't have much time to process it, and I just remember he came home and told us, um, and at 7 years old you don't know what that means. You don't understand the finality of it. So okay, so she passed away, but she's coming home for supper, right? Like you don't get that, and then people come over and it becomes a party, and there's people there for shiva and people bringing gifts, and so it only kicked in for me. I would say a couple years later. um, I knew that there was a loss, but I didn't appreciate what it was, and how it was really going to impact my life. Because, like you said before, I was a happy-go-lucky kid. Life was great. Okay, fine. So mommy's not tucking me into bed. So who's tucking me into bed? I mean, my parents were on shluchas, so again, I don't remember all those days, but I'm sure there were many days that my mother was out at a function, or she ran the mikveh, so it wasn't as much of a shock to me at that moment as it was for everybody else around me. But later, as I
When you
got
say
older,
everyone else, you mean the older kids, or also the younger
not
kids?
so much the older kids versus the younger kids, the community. My mother was a pillar of the community. She was a teacher in the school. She ran the mikvah. She counseled girls. She was the girls' high school. They named the high school after her. So she was a pillar. So for everybody else, there was this major trauma for me as well, but I didn't appreciate it because I was a kid. So it's like going to summer camp. You forget your family when you're in summer camp, but you come out. Oh yeah,
I
some
got
kids do,
family. Yeah.
but
Let's just take a quick moment because it is her yard. So maybe we can dedicate this. Le'ilui Nishmas
Rachalea Bas Shalom Yishaya.
Shalom Yishai. She should be. The neshama should have an aliyah, and more importantly, I think she should be a good Meretz Yosher for all of you. For
Amen.
all of us.
Amen. And she has been. She has been. It's interesting.
When was the first moment that you noticed that wait, something isn't right at all? And just maybe even before that, your father suddenly is running a household of 11 kids. He's the head shliach in Long Beach at the time, right? What the day after? How did like the day after Shiva at least, or the day after the dust settled? What did that look like?
So the dust settled very slowly for me. Um, we had a cousin live with us for a year, so she became, you know,
Motherly.
motherly, and she took care of us and bathed us and made sure that we had whatever we needed. And then my father got remarried, and she came in and took care of a lot of things. So even though what looks to everybody else as chaos, for me it wasn't. And I think in many ways I've functioned in life in a different way than your typical kid who deals with loss and grief. Because for me, I didn't get caught up in all the emotions of things at that point. So it was like, okay, so this is who's taking care of me now. This is the next person, and I didn't realize it as an issue. It was just what it was. Um, I remember somebody asking me when I was 16, 17 years old, and I said I had a great childhood. Like it was perfect. I didn't realize I had experienced all that stuff. But I think when did I begin realizing that things weren't so smooth? Is once I went to yeshiva. Once I went to yeshiva and I was 13. I was away for the week. I would come home for Shabbos. But being away, I realized, okay, I was different. Um, I wasn't my mother wasn't calling on the payphone. And when I struggled, I didn't, a lot of kids, they'll call their mommy and they'll get that reassurance. And I didn't have that place to turn to. So I think when I was in yeshiva began the early awareness that I'm beginning to struggle.
You were speaking about that you work a little bit with people on finding that identity. Just before, we know Patrick Carnes, that he's kind of like the person that began the term sex addiction, and he talks about that there's like these core beliefs, pathogenic, not healthy beliefs that really drive this disease particularly. And like many things, like probably all addictions, but particularly sex addiction or sex issues, stem from a person really not knowing who they are, from a really destroyed sense of self, of
Absolutely.
and trying to create it through sex or sexual actions.
So I'm again, I don't know much about the kind of the overall addictive world. I mean, I know a little bit that I've participated in 12-step programs and things of that sort. Um, but um, but I wouldn't say it's directed only at sex addiction. I would say it's whatever it is, whether it's gambling, whether it's drug addiction. It's, again, from what I've seen, it's all addictions. Is any addiction? Why do you keep going back to that thing? Because you're looking for according to Chassidus, we're looking for the spark. And I would say, according to the addictive thing, there's one thing that we think is in there that's going to fill the void that's not able to be filled with other than with self-acceptance.
I would like to even think that it is there. It's not that we think it's there. There is something that any addiction gives us that satisfies a part of us, not in the right way, but there's something there. Maybe using that, and I'm going totally out on a limb here, but like the idea of the nitzotzes, there could be some nitzotzes there that attract me. They might not be the right ones for me in my avodah.
So I look at it and I say that again, from my perspective, is that there's no benefit. It's unhealthy calories, so to speak. There's no benefit in the bigger picture of it's soothing you. It's a pacifier, but and in many ways that's a benefit. Fine, we need to be able to be pacified. Otherwise, we won't be able to live. We won't be able to exist. But there's no nourishment in it. And we have to really, from a healing standpoint, we have to ultimately let go of it and find the nourishing within ourselves. And that's how eventually you break through break through from these things, because you're no longer holding on to it, and you're beginning to eat healthy calories.
Right.
A person I worked with once, a therapist that I worked with, he said to me that he says, and I'm just mentioning this because I think it's a very poignant point, is that lust or essentially addiction will never, sorry, healthy love and healthy relationships will never match up to what lust will give you. But at the end of the day, lust will never fill you. And living healthily, you will become fulfilled.
Okay, so let me translate this the way I understand it. Lust, or that's in the sexual realm, but let's say doing drugs, they give you something that you can't get in the normal
Exactly.
wavelength of life. But those highs, they're not giving you that fulfillment that this actual wavelength of life can
Exactly.
give.
A loving relationship with your wife will never
Right,
love with your wife will never be like that.
right.
But
It doesn't
love is
have that
ultimately, it
high.
doesn't have the high, but it has a nourishing, meaningful connection, a beautiful relationship.
Mhm.
It's very satisfying, very gratifying. You feel like, oh, I can just sit in this
Yeah.
and sit in a healthy connection.
And like, I do believe all addictions serve really a lack of sense of self, and
Absolutely.
that's true. I think for some reason, and this just has been my experience, I might be wrong, but sex addiction hits even deeper. I think sex is a core identitative issue. That means that people that go there are even a level again, and I might be I most people, and definitely with all the disclaimers, but I feel like that addiction is when people feel like an absolute zero or minus 14, because it also mimics like a fulfilling idea. Like, let's say in Hasidus, it talks about that sex is really a holy act because it's the closest act of creation, basically, that we can almost create in this world. And I think on the flip side, that when you abuse it, you're also abusing something at the core of self, at the core non-self or of self. This has just been my experience working with people in this. I could be wrong. I also work, with people with other addictions, but I find that is kind of true.
I think if I mean, again, I haven't thought much about this, but if I'm thinking about it now, sex is ultimately the unification of two separate individuals becoming one. Physically, we're designed that way, but that's really what it is. And over here, you're becoming one with something that's not you, whether it's one with a computer screen, one with another individual, really whoever it is, your identity of oneness is being misunderstood. So it is a part, like you said. I think it is a core part of self that's being destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Different than what drugs might do, or
Because
what.
I could still say, yeah, I'm drinking way too much, or I'm doing too many drugs, but it's not me. I'm doing drugs, I'm ingesting them, but that's not
But it's
my
but
core.
they're ultimately coming from the same part.
They do.
Is
They
that
do.
I'm not happy with me. I'm not at peace with me, and I'm finding the peace elsewhere.
And sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's more I can't be happy because I've been like hurt so badly that my system doesn't know
Yeah.
how to be in the present. So that's my
Oh,
only
that's a one of my pet peeves is when people say all the time they're like okay, so just have
stop.
to stop and have a different mindset and meditate, and you're like I can't stop to think and have a meditate. I don't even know what meditation is, let alone to stop and think that and yeah, it's the whole thing is uh, it's all a journey, and um, you have to find peace with yourself in some level first. Medication is another example. A lot of people are against medication. A lot of people are totally pro medication. I'm not here to promote it one way or the other. But what I have found is for certain people, you need to take some medication just to be calm, to be able to begin looking at your situation and finding yourself, because sometimes you're in a spiral going crazy for years, and you can't make peace, and just take a deep breath. So I'll tell you, take a deep breath, and you're like, I don't know how to breathe. And so sometimes you need an external support to help you get to that place, and then you can start breathing, and then you can.
Yeah. I personally this resonates a lot to me. I probably lean a little bit less towards like long-term medication, unless we're
Oh,
talking
long
about
term for
severe
sure not.
psychosis or whatever.
Yeah.
But I have found that for some clients, they needed a beginning point. Like if you're so anxious, or you're so compulsive, or you're so obsessive that you can't begin the process, there has to be
I,
something to slow it down, to bring you to the place where you can begin doing the
yeah.
actual work.
And, I'll speak about myself is that I had done work with various therapists for a number of years and made a lot of progress. But at the end of the day, I kept getting to this place where I kept hitting a wall. And the therapist I was working with at the time said to me, "It's like, as you seem to have just existential angst. Existing is anxious for you." And I agreed with him. I just didn't know what to do. And no matter how much more we were talking, we kept hitting a wall. You um, I've done breath work a little bit, not a major amount of breath work, but a little bit. And part of the process of breath work, at least for me, was in the beginning was a little bit of almost like hyperventilating, and it's like it's too much, and then okay,
You
we can
broke through
calm.
it.
Yeah, you can calm down.
I'm
And
assuming you did holotropic breath work, like where you breathe very fast.
yeah.
So the idea is really to induce that state.
Right. And so, but then it stops, and then you catch your breath, and then we could do it again,
And
and you catch your breath.
the way it actually works is that we introduce an anxiety state through the breathing by not taking the stops in between, constantly in and out in a very quick, fast, circular way. But what it is different than a panic attack is that you're contained in a group, laying on the floor, and having someone, hopefully, most of the times at least, have someone guiding you through it,
Yeah.
where you can induce that state of like a panic attack and yet be fully contained and held.
Yeah.
And that's the healing part, I think, where it's like, wow, I can be in this state and still be okay.
Yeah. So for me, when I get to those states, I don't like it because it's because it does bring up a lot of anxiety, and when it brings up anxiety, it brings up a lot of the past. But so again, part of the healing is going to be painful, and this is something which I was thinking about. Healing is a painful journey. I haven't found anybody that said, "Oh, my healing was great. It was easy going." Healing is a painful journey, but it doesn't have to be alone. You don't have to suffer through it, but you have to know it's going to be a journey, and we can breathe through it. We can make it through, but you have to continue moving forward in it.
Let's circle back a little bit so you're 13, you're going to yeshiva, and you're starting to notice things are not so right. Beginning to notice. How do you notice?
It's hard to go back to just the mindset of a 13-year-old because of all the work that I've done looking back at that 13-year-old. So I don't know, what I was thinking then or what I know now. What was going on then was everybody seemed to be going about their day, living life, going to class, taking their tests, whatever. For me, everything at that stage was a whole experience. Oh, I'm taking a test. Oh, what's happening? What's the grade I got? How did I do it? How did I get there? How do I study for the test? Everything was a huge weight sitting on my shoulders. And while a lot of the guys during recess were playing basketball, I was still processing what happened during the day. How am I? And so I realized I'm not operating the same way as everybody else. And I'm just trying to fit in. Where do I fit into this picture of life? Again, at that stage, 13 years old, my life is the yeshiva world, but essentially, it's the same thing that continued afterwards. Is where do I fit into this picture of life? How everybody seems to be, easygoing, and I'm not. And I don't think if you would ask my friends then if they saw that, I don't think they did.
But I like the way you put this. So the way you notice is that life was just too difficult to process. While everybody else seems to be about going their life, in some ways going to play sports and breaks and so on, you're still just trying to figure out the day, which we know is maybe a PTSD response where the memories haven't or the experiences haven't been fully processed and digested. So therefore, everything becomes a very, very big deal.
Yeah, and you asked me before what's the earliest time. If I go back even a little earlier, when I was 12, 13 years old, before I went to yeshiva, my friends were getting into Mifzayim, going, we're going to conquer Long Beach and make every Jew in Long Beach, we're going to put tefillin on them. And I was sitting there going, I can't do this stuff. I can't do it. Because I'm not okay with myself, let alone to go and ask somebody else. So it was all about, at that stage in my life, it was all about finding me. How can I be me? And I kept searching for me, and I didn't find me for many, many years later. But that was so much of my journey. And when like I said, when I went to yeshiva, it became highlighted. Yeah.
And how did it progress? So let's catch up. So you're 17, you leave LA?
So when I was 16, I went to London. I was there for 3 years. Those were actually very calm years. It was very interesting. And I think a lot of it is, I had a lot of us were guys coming from different places, and we were in like a little bit of a melting pot, all of us in the same in the same boat. It wasn't a huge yeshiva either. And it didn't feel like there was a sense of people who have it worked out. So those years, when I think about them, of course there were struggles and of course there were things, but I felt like I had a chevra. I felt like I belonged. I was an equal with everybody at that time. And so it was slowly growing. Once I left London, I went to Litera. That's where suddenly I'm in a melting pot of I don't remember how many guys, 200, 300 guys. And that's where I suddenly felt like, wait, there's people who know where they're going. There's shiurim going on that are higher level shiurim. There's stuff going on, and I'm lost.
That's where we met, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like just for counterweight, was I one of those people that you thought that,
Oh,
wow,
100%.
they know exactly where they're going?
1,000,000%.
Can I tell you how I felt on the inside? Not meaning looking back also, I was the epitome of lost. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I wanted. Like, I was just following a system, pretending to be a part of, trying to gauge my environment based off other people, how they're doing it. And I wonder, as you say this, how many of us were really more feeling like this, but presenting maybe like they got it all together, but they weren't.
So it's true. It's true. I mean, as I speak to people now, looking, reminiscing, everybody, I don't think there's anybody who says like, oh yeah, I had it all worked out. I knew where I was going. This guy was trying to be the top of that, and this guy was trying to just survive, and this guy was busy taking drugs, and this guy, everybody was doing their thing. But I think in my world, what I viewed, my perspective was reality, or was my reality. And what, for me, the areas that I was struggling in, and somebody had, whether they succeeded in that area or they at least faked it enough to succeed in that area, it was, to me, I saw that as, oh, see, they have it all worked out. I remember I went to, there was Gerlitsky's share and Rabbi Saul's share, and Rabbi Blooming had a share. And so I went to Rabbi Blooming's share, and I felt terrible. Like
less than.
I didn't feel less than, because I had a group of guys, but I felt like, see, using you as an example, I don't remember that I thought this specifically, but Shlomi's in Rabbi Saul's share. He even sits close. You used to schmooze with him, if I remember correctly.
I just pretended.
Yeah,
I went over to him with questions because that's what everyone. I had no real questions. I was trying to make them up.
Yeah, but in the mind of the person struggling, it seems like They all,
Everybody else has it.
one of the
Not
things
me.
again, Baruch Hashem, I don't struggle as much nowadays with the things that I did in the past. But in the earlier years of shluchus, I remember wondering, like, am I doing well financially? Like, am I good? I'm paying my bills, but are these other people's? And somebody once posted by accident, how like there was a group with Trump. Somebody put a reporter in by accident, and so somebody somehow added me to this thing, and they posted somebody's budget and their income statement, and I looked through it, and I was like, him? He doesn't have money? I was like, for sure he has money. He had it all worked out. He's paying his bills. He's buying buildings, whatever. Little did I know he was had an image he was looking to portray, and I do wish there was a way that we can all see into other people's lives, not from a voyeuristic standpoint, but just to like get a picture of what's going on. What is Shlomi's life? Let's put it out there. In a sense, that's part of what this podcast is.
Let's get real.
Let's get real, and let's see the people who seem to have it worked out. Not everybody has it worked out, and it allows you to say, wait, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah. I had our mutual friend Yossi Fagenson, and that was he basically said that part of the gift of becoming a therapist for him was that getting to know, the more he gets to know the struggle of his clients, the more he respects them. It's like, it's getting real. This is a real person.
Yeah.
And that's a gift. That's a gift that we can like just stop pretending and stop thinking that if other people think that we're okay, then we are okay, or any of that. And honestly, that's a gift.
My favorite moment of working with my clients is because, in the beginning, they, people who have been to therapy, they'll come right in and jump right into the work. But somebody who's new, they'll share and they'll dance around, this, and they'll say, yeah, childhood, this, my that, and that. And then after like, 3, 4, 5 sessions, they finally say, I've struggled with depression. And you're like, okay, now we're talking. Now we're getting to the real. Exactly. Now we can do work, because you're once you shine the light on your true inner self, then I'm working with a client right now who has been uncomfortable to share his real identity, and I respect that. So we've ultimately spoken on the phone, and he pays in a way that that people So I don't know. I honestly don't even know who he is. And I said to him, and it was a little bit of a sense of contention, a little bit in the process. But I said to him, once you break through that barrier and your true inner self begins to be exposed, that's when your healing is really going to go. Because you have to break through that. If you keep it in shame, you end up getting stuck.
Right. And maybe combining this just a little bit what we were saying. If the core of it is that I don't know who I am, or I'm really struggling with my identity of self, then the shame drives that, keeps on driving. It's like, if people really would know who you are, if they would know that about you, forget about it. That's where everybody's going to pull the plug and say, you're not good enough. That's not, you're not going to be able to, and that I need to hide that. And until I can break and say, I am deserving of being in this world exactly as I am today, you're gonna struggle.
Because part of why I'm comfortable doing this podcast now, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, 5 years ago, never. No, there's an image I want to portray, but it doesn't help, because ultimately I'm still struggling inside.
Yeah.
Once you share out and you say, this is who I am, this is my history, this is my story, take it or leave it. And if you want to leave it. That's by all means.
I think we covered that also a little bit with Yossi, the idea that people think, and this is, I think for me, a big risk, and a risk, and I work on it. Like the idea, think that, you're a therapist, so if you help people with anxiety, or you help people with depression, you must not have it. I am here to say that I get anxious aplenty, I get depressed at times, and if you need a therapist that doesn't get depressed, sorry, I might not be able to help you, but I would like to also.
But I'll say you might not be able to find help. Period.
That, and also, where does this idea come from that you can only help someone if you kind of became a rebbe, you became a tzaddik?
What's
Where does this come
what's the
from?
expression? You can't help somebody unless you walk a mile in their shoes or something like that.
Yes.
You know, if you've, I'm a believer that if you've experienced this, then not only you have a mitzvah to help somebody
Yeah.
because you have the lived experience. It's very nice to read a book and talk about you know, whatever it is, you know, but is if you've experienced it, that's the
Yeah. And that's our gift. Let's just do a quick flashback to our cohort when we were in school. I think every single person there, young to old, as much, they all came with a road traveled that had pekalach and
yeah
bumps and struggles.
yeah
And
yeah.
that's why we're all there. That's why we are there in the first place. And I think that
One of the things I loved about Kivu Proman is that he said it like it is, and he says it publicly. You know, he says, you know, I came from a dysfunctional home. Um, you know, I've dealt with my struggle. I got my degree to become a doctor, to get my doctorate to prove something.
yeah.
Like how beautiful is it that you can see that? Like, oh, he was looking to prove something,
Right.
and he's a successful guy. He's a kind, compassionate, loving therapist.
On that note, by the way, his brother Sonny Perlman also
Yeah.
has a podcast. He had his son. He had Kiwi's son on.
Oh, cool.
It's as a former student of Kiwi, I think it's such a geschmack. First of all, what a beautiful person as well. But just seeing the mannerisms and the thoughts of one of my deep influences in therapy, like spilling over into like his son's thinking and ideas.
Yeah.
It was really beautiful.
I did one more thing about Kiwi, which a year ago. So by my mother's yard site a year ago, we got together and I asked Kiwi would he do a family therapy session. You know, not that we were needing, but it just like every year by my mother's yard site we get together. Sometimes we'll bring an old student, old friend, somebody to share a few words. And so we said, you know, Kiwi was my teacher at the time. I said, why don't we? Why don't, he said I would love the honor, and he just sat there, witnessed, but you know, just his love, sitting there and witnessing 11 people on their individual journeys. It was a beautiful experience.
Yeah. Bring this back to you. So you're 19, realizing like, wait, why is everything so much more difficult for me? How is this progressing for you as you get older? Okay, now you go on shlichus.
So I'll tell you when the first time that I noticed a real like a wake up call was when I went on shlichus. So I was given the honor to go on shlichus to Australia. Australia was the top shlichus in, you know.
Wait. Where did you go? To Sydney or to Melbourne?
To Melbourne.
Oh.
Not only to Melbourne, there's two Melbournes.
Yeah.
I went to YG.
YG. Okay.
These are the places where Shimi Reichik went. Yossi Schusterman went. The big machers in Lubavitch, Majeski, you know, and I got that shlichus, and it was a very conflicting experience for me because I knew my own stuff, and next thing I know, I'm going on shlichus to there, and you know, and I finally made it, so to speak.
So, but when you say you knew your own stuff, what does that mean at this point?
I knew my inner struggles,
Which was
where
do I belong?
More than where do I belong. I knew that me sitting and in my okay. So there's two different parts of this. One is I knew where I needed to, where I desired to be, and in a certain sense, it was like it was the validation. Looking back, it was actually a very big validation as a you're okay. You can be you, and you're going to get shlichus. You're going to get a good shlichus. At the same time, it was the shoes were too big for me at the time to fill, or they felt too big for me at the time to fill. And I knew my struggles, and I said, I'm going to go there, be a shliach. I'm not Shimi Reichik. I'm not Yossi Schusterman, and or any of the people in the years later. You know, there were people that I knew from a couple years before me that that I just felt like I can't measure up to that. And I got there, and I was there for 3 or 4 months, and my brother was getting married So I was flying back for his wedding, and my plan was to go home and not come back
Quit.
because it was just way too much for me, and I wasn't ready to.
So on the one hand, like going there was a confirmation. Hey, Ezzy, you made it.
Exactly.
But that
But I wasn't ready to receive it.
exaggerated a much bigger problem. It's like, but I'm not.
Exactly.
Who am I? I don't even know how to fill anything.
I wasn't ready to receive the confirmation that I was given. And when I came back, my plan was to not go back. And eventually, I worked through it and decided I'm going to go back. But I went back with a new attitude, and essentially that was the first step on my healing journey. And I think that's actually very appropriate for this conversation. Is that once I went back, I said I'm not going back like any of those people. I'm me. And what does that mean? I'm not going to be able to make the Hanhala happy. I'm not going to be able to please the world. I'm just going to have to be me. And ultimately, that was a huge part of my healing. It's funny. I never thought about this until this minute. That's really what has been part of the steps of my healing for years afterwards. Is the more I embraced myself as me, the more at peace I was. Barry Horowitz from Bunch of Bagels. So Barry was one of the Bachram there, and I have a very good relationship with him, and I remember him telling me then, "Oh, I can relate to you. I can't relate to the other guys." And we spoke about it, for years. We're still friends, and I was thinking about it. It's like, why was he able to relate to me? Because I was me, and I wasn't the mold. But I didn't appreciate me yet. So it's interesting. You can make an impact, but you're not necessarily fully impacting yourself, appreciating yourself. And so that's how my life continued until I began to be able to be embraced and say, no, I'm me. I'm good. I'm okay as I am. But it took a lot more work.
Yeah. So you go on Shlichus, you stayed for the full 2 years, I think.
I stayed for the full 2 years.
And you come back to Crown Heights?
I came back to Crown Heights. I was in Crown Heights for, by that point I was 23.
Anything that happened in Australia that you think might be relevant to this conversation after that, where you felt like you almost had to leave?
I think the main point for me that I found very relevant is that when I came back with a mindset of there's what for me to do here that's not what I imagined, and that helped me tremendously. I was able to develop friends that I wouldn't have developed if I was stuck in that world. I was able to go places and do things, and without the bigger image of of the rest of the world. And as I allowed that to be, it allowed me to be more free. Again, I didn't appreciate it yet, but that was the thing. I mean, Australia for me was again 2 great years. I loved it. I had fun. It's a beautiful country, very very laid back. The community is very warm, and those were all things that fed my they nurtured my little boy, I guess, in many ways.
They saw you.
It wasn't so much about being seen. It was just that I was okay. I was in an environment. I was in a certain cocoon that was working.
Yeah. I
don't know if Rabbi Cohen loved it as much, but I was good.
I'm guessing that's an inside reference. I'm not sure who he is.
Oh, yeah, I thought you know. Rabbi Cohen is was the Rosh Yeshiva, So he was very much, he's very, by the book, very strict, and but he was very compassionate. I did at one point tell him, that I was struggling, but I think it was right before I went home. And
can we, when he said I'm struggling with, what did you tell him at the time?
I was struggling with the responsibility of, here I am, a guy coming from Rabbi Blooming's share, supposed to be teaching the Bachrim how to learn. And so I was dealing with my own stuff, and the pressure was crazy. And I told him, so I actually, I'll share this as well. Is that it was the first time the Rebbe Cohen was what's amazing is that he set me up with a therapist then, and that was the first therapist I ever saw in my life.
And let's just place this in a time frame that's just around the year 99, 2000. So we're talking about 25 years ago.
Yeah,
So that
27 years ago.
27.
Because
oh, right. You went
it was in 99.
And that was not so common back then at all. To go.
Yes, and there was a lot of shame. I remember I snuck out. I met with the guy maybe 5 or 6 times.
But the fact that the rabbi tuned in and said, "Hey, let's do that," that's impressive.
Yeah, it was the first time, and it was very helpful for that period. And that's, like I said, I think that's what allowed me to have 2 good years there.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so you come back to Crown Heights. That's now the stage where we kind of finish our education, finish lichas. Maybe you're still doing smicha, but you're now a little bit more on your own.
Yeah. So again, I didn't. Those 3 years, I think when I came back, I developed a certain protection mechanism. Is getting and this was part of my struggle, is that developing a sense of workaholism. I didn't have to be uncomfortable with myself if I was working. I knew I was good at that. And I knew I was good at. I was doing some accounting and bookkeeping for the Shlomo office. I was developing their website at the time. I felt good because I was doing something. I was able to be there. I was engrossed in, and I'd work late hours.
Did you notice at the time already that you're using doing as a distraction from being?
I knew that I didn't feel fully okay with myself, but I didn't notice it as a distraction. I just noticed it as, okay, I'm struggling with myself in many ways, but
something.
But I had something that was fulfilling me, so I didn't do anything about it. And I look back and I was like, I mean, again, I make peace with where I am, but so many of these things, I wish I would have known them then, because it would have helped me in so many other ways.
And I just wanted a compassion piece. I don't know if I like those words, but like the idea that today, if you go to our group of friends, I would think at least half will still feel like I need to do in order to be okay. This is still a common belief that, like, if I am productive, if I'm a good therapist, if I'm a productive, amazing therapist, or whatever it is, then my value is real and I have a right to exist. But if I were to just sit and twiddle diddly thumb, I don't have a right to exist.
So I will say, being is one of when you're dealing with self-worth and self-acceptance, just being is one of the most traumatic experiences. It's extremely traumatic, and that's why there's it's very, very hard for somebody to address these issues, because you have to go through that hell of just being. Now you think about it, it's like, what do you mean? Just being? What kind of, just to sit on the beach and read a book, go for a walk in nature. I remember I live in Northern California. It's beautiful. And I love nature. I love the nature. But in the beginning it was like, what? I'm just going to go on. If I'm walking with a bus, then I can go for a walk in the hills, but I can't just go walk by myself, because then I'm just being. And that's like, there's no point in it. And getting to that place where you can just be, it's like, it's, like I was saying, like we were saying before, it's a different, it's not a high, it's not a drug high, but it's an at peace high. Like, oh, I'm good.
Right.
I don't need anything more.
True. Like the gift of consciousness, like becoming present to whatever we're doing, even if it's just being.
Yeah.
Bring this back. So you're Crown Heights, 23, keeping yourself very busy in order not to feel too much, but something isn't right. But keeping yourself busy is feeling pretty okay.
So at that point, I began dated a number of girls, and didn't find the right one. That added to the feeling of dejection. All my friends are getting married. I'm going to another wedding, not my wedding yet. But I had a core group of friends that I would, get together with, and then slowly, one by one, they would drop off. So that was a little bit of a challenge. Um, and then at a certain point, I met my wife, um, and I made a leap of faith to get married, and the leap of faith was more around. I knew that I liked her. I knew that she liked me, but was I sure that she would be okay with me after we get married? You know, is this
Like if she finds out the real me.
Yeah, like she knows. I mean, she saw the real me. She saw who I was, but I had to like. It was a big decision. Like, if I'm going into this for the rest of my life, there's she's going to be living with me, and I'm having a hard time living with me. Let alone having her live with me is going to be a challenge.
So you were conscious of that thought.
Yeah, oh,
that
100%. Yeah, I was very conscious of it. But
See, I'm
once
envious. I'm envious because when I got married, I don't think I thought much about anything, and I don't know if that's better. It was easier, maybe, but I'm not sure if it's better. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
So but you took that leap of faith, jumped into it, and
and Baruch Hashem, we just celebrated 20 years.
20 years,
Yeah.
Mazel Tov. Wow.
2 weeks ago, something like that.
Oh, nice.
And it's been a ride. It's been beautiful. We're both very intense people, and we're both people who grow. And when you have two intense people that are growing, there can be intense moments. But ultimately, we've grown tremendously as a couple and as individuals as well.
Yeah. I'm reading this book right now. It's called Passionate Marriage by David Schnark. And he says so much of our relationships where we walk around with this belief that we're not supposed to have intense moments in our relationship. And therefore, whenever we have an intense moment, it's like, we're not working. What are we doing wrong? How can we fix it? He says maybe sometimes you need to accept that, yeah, you're two individuals. You can have intense moments, especially if you're big personalities. That's part of the relationship.
Yeah.
Just be okay with that.
Yeah.
And that's refreshing. Like there are all these modalities. No, you really need to understand the deepest thought and emotion of your.
You're intense.
You're two different people.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're intense.
So here we are. We're married. I have my first kid, my second kid, and again, I still hadn't worked through this stuff. I'm trying to remember when, and for probably the first 10 years of our marriage, about 10 years of our marriage, that was my journey that I held inside.
Private.
Private.
No clue what's going on in your world.
And I tried reaching out to people to get therapeutic guidance. And again, when you're doing it secretly, you don't have that. And again, in the past 10 years, the amount of support went through the roof. Baruch
Thank
Hashem.
God.
To add to the struggle is that I moved on shluchus, so I took myself again. On the one hand, it was positive. I took myself away from the social scene, so I didn't have to deal with all that.
But how was that beneficial to you?
Because I didn't have to see other people on their journeys. It was,
and you weren't confronted with the lack of your journey?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. But then I was dealing with, again, a new world, a shluchus world. Financial responsibilities, raising a family,
being in charge,
being in charge, exactly, being the adult, and when you want it to still be nurtured, you have to be the adult. It's a bit of a challenge,
struggle.
So that process, ultimately, and then at a certain point, I shared with my wife, trying to avoid it, and then. We had a conversation. She was asking me, she's like, something's not adding up in what you're saying here. And then I spelled it, and that brought everything to the forefront. All my history, all my struggles, everything, all the cans of worms that were never going to be public, suddenly, and it wasn't public, it was just my wife, suddenly became exposed for being addressed.
Can I say something? And I mean it not wholeheartedly, but I think it in a way. Like you were saying, when your client came to session 5 and says, "Hey, and sometimes I'm depressed," that's when we say,
Yeah.
"Oh, now we're starting." In a way, in your relationship, that's when you start. That's when you got married.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's funny because there was a certain point where I said, we should just scrap the ksuba, get remarried. Like let's start fresh.
Hey, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I like this idea of a recommitment ceremony.
I totally
I'm totally into it. Like, I understand why people do it. I hope to one day do so myself again. I believe that there's something really. It's like when it gets real is
at a certain point. At a certain point, and I said, we need to start fresh. And I just felt like that. Once you cross over that barrier of we're beginning to grow, you want to. In many ways, your past. I mean, your past informs your present, but you want to put your past in a certain sense behind you, like, and say, you know what, it does inform my present, but I don't need to highlight my past fully.
Yeah.
So that was just
as a quick side note. Like,
yeah.
I think that my friend Mendel Zirkin, he told me, like, he read my chart. He does astrology, something like he used to a lot
in Hawaii.
Yeah,
he read your chart. What do you mean?
When I was like 20 years ago, he like looked at my and said, "You would make a good psychologist." At that time, I was like as far removed from psychology as you could possibly think, very unaware of self and anything. But he said, like, and if I look back, a lot of people felt very comfortable sharing like their lives with me. And to this point, sometimes, people were getting married, they had some issues in the beginning and turned to Shlomi. But the moment they got better, they didn't want to see Shlomi anymore because Shlomi reminded them of all the crap that wasn't going right. And I think that was one of my early understandings, that this work, the hazards of, so to say, you can be in the helping profession, but if you're in it in order to get something out of it, it's not going to work out well.
Ellie Nash just interviewed somebody. Oh, he didn't interview. He was talking about Moshe Feiglin. There's two Moshe Feiglin, the one in Israel, and he was saying this is exactly the same thing. Is that Moshe was a therapist for a couple of years, and then he took a break from it because he said, for me, I was doing this for my own ego, and I had to leave it and then come back for to be there. He's like, it doesn't mean that you don't have good days and you're like, oh, I did a good job today, but at the same time, it's like
we can't live.
You can't live that.
Yeah, because, and I think Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson at our graduation, I don't know if you remember, he was very vocal about the fact that there are a lot of bad therapists out there, and that they're in it to help themselves and to aggrandize themselves and to make themselves feel better. And he said the worst thing that can happen to you is that you have one of those therapists. They're worse than not having a therapist. And I think I agree.
So one of the things I'll say, my wife says this publicly, so I don't have a problem saying it. My wife went through a journey of healing and growth, and if you want to listen to our podcast, you'll
super popular,
very popular. A Path Forward, little plug there. But if you
plug it for real, A Path Forward. She basically takes the Rebbe's ideas and applies them to how life today,
healing, growth,
yeah, and how basically showing that the Rebbe was really deeply involved in that space.
Absolutely, yeah.
In this, yeah.
And so she talks about that her struggles were, and she's always been a very talented person, very capable, always a leader, always had stuff going on. But when she crashed, she was unable to move forward until she got to the place that there's no more me as part of this. The Eibishter gave me a gift to teach. I'm going to teach. But it's not about me being seen through my teaching.
Yeah.
I'm just teaching.
We were talking right before the podcast about the Tfilas Rambam that's attributed to the Rambam, but one of my friends who's a historian, he told me, unfortunately, that is not the case. But the Tfilas Rambam is a Tfilas Haroifa. And part of that, his prayer was, or the prayer was, please let me just be a conduit for God's work and really remove myself out of it, because if it's about me, I'll be destructive.
I remember being in school, and somebody said to me before I started school, you don't learn much in school, and it's probably true. I mean, you learn, but
I think we learn the professional stance.
Yeah. And one of the things that in my internship and while I was learning, what my supervisor kept telling me is, Ezzy, it's not your job to fix the person. It's your job to clear the path so that they can walk. And I look back and I thought about it, is like, my goal to fix them was for me. I want to fix you for me so that I could feel good. But if I'm not here to make me feel good, I'm here to help you, then I just need to clear the path, because you're going to walk on your own. You're going to be able to do it.
Yeah. So you're firmly in the camp of a fellow traveler.
Yes. Wounded healer, fellow traveler.
All those things.
Yeah.
Okay. So bringing this back. So 10 years into your relationship, it gets real. Everything comes to the forefront. So
everything comes to the forefront.
You're like 35 at this point, give or take.
Give or take, yeah. And like you said, that's when the healing begins, because it forces you and your, in this case I was married, but it forces you and those who are around you. Anybody who heals forces the whole environment to change.
Right.
Whether it's a child within a family or whether it's in a marriage or whatever it is, it forces everything to change. And suddenly the status quo of my relationship had to be looked at differently.
Right. Meaning in your family systems theories, like when one piece of this of the system suddenly changes,
exactly,
the whole system needs to change along with it in order to accommodate.
And
most of the times for the good when someone is.
Yeah, it was ultimately for the good, but it forced all my struggles to come out in the public, and then my wife had to navigate my struggles. I had to navigate her struggles, and her struggles with my struggles, and it really it sent me. I went to 12 steps for a little bit. I did other healing retreats in other areas, and it really shifted our whole relationship and our whole everything about my life, and allowed us to begin walking this new path that I didn't even know what it was, because it was no longer the path of everybody else.
Right.
It was suddenly
your own path.
My own
charting
path.
Your own path.
And that was probably of the most painful part of my journey, was beginning to walk on my own path. Again, another therapist once told me, he said, when healing, there's different, life, you're walking down a road with pebbles that is nicely paved over and everything. When you begin healing, you're walking through a forest, and you're having to chop down weeds and chop down different things. So as much as I struggled before and I did a little bit of work, this was the first time I'm beginning to do real work. And fight through the real pain and the real areas of looking at myself. And can I embrace myself as I am? I never had physical struggles, but like I'm saying, struggles with my physical looking at myself. Some people have a struggle looking at themselves in the mirror, but imagine waking up every morning and you have to deal with the pimple that's on your nose, and you have to deal with it and you have to see it. I suddenly had to deal with the pimple on my nose. And, what I always saw and just avoided, suddenly I had to deal with it.
There was no way around it anymore. It was facing you head on.
It was facing it head on. And again, it was a journey. It was
you speak of this journey as if it's in the past.
No,
you're saying it is a journey.
It is a journey. I think I speak of it as in the past a little bit, because the parts of it are, when you begin this journey, you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I'll be the first to say that this is something that I'm going to deal with in many ways, and everybody deals with their stuff till the day they die. Um, you know, I believe you heal, but it informs who you are. And as much as we grow, and I'm continuing to grow, I don't know that you ever arrive. And my wife, I'll talk a little bit about somatic healing. My wife is, in the beginning she would work with the somatic healer, and finances were a little tight at the time, and I'm like, we're spending more money every day, every time, like another $100, another $100, and which was a discount, but it was just like more and more and more, and my wife would say, do you see the transformation? Do you see the growth? And she's like, I'm going to go till the day I die, because there's so much more growth to always get to. But you get to a point in the healing that it's like, I can breathe every day, I can exist, and I can do other things. And there are times where I don't feel that way.
So that's what you mean by it was a journey, because sometimes in the journey it feels like I can't do anything else but just sticking to my recovery or to my growth or to my what's it called. But now you're definitely still on the journey, as we are always in life, but it's not the only thing that's happening in my life. This is part of what's happening in my life. I like that. I think like the idea of I like Kol Olam Kulo Keshet Tzarma, like the whole world is really a narrow bridge, like Rav Nachman. And to me, this is like I really talk to clients about, we're on a road. Sometimes, like you said, it's nicely paved, no potholes, very wide and easy to walk in, and even, and it feels okay. It's geschmack. But sometimes that path becomes a pothole-ridden path where you blow out tires and you don't know how to continue. You gotta like hold on to roots to just make it to the next hill. That's the journey.
Yeah.
And like really just understanding that there is no arrival, and but embracing, so to say, this journey is so much of the work. Like, things will go wrong. Things won't be smooth, but they're actually the ones that make your walking on the paved part of the road.
So one of the things that I struggled with in that at that period, and I eventually found, I would say you'd be a part of it, is finding people. Therapists are great, and they can give you a general picture, but finding people, friends that you can know that are not going to judge you at all. You can say whatever, this is what I'm going through, and they're holding that space for you. And there's one part where they're holding the space for you and they're doing their work, but you need to also embrace that they're holding the space for you and say they're really not judging you. And it's okay to speak, to cry, to share, and that allows you to feel more safe. And again, it's all about feeding that safety, but not living. And it's feeding the foundation of safety, and then you venture out. Once I found enough safety within myself, then I began to, I'll go back. Why did I start going to school? Once I found enough safety within myself.
It's going to be my next question. Like, what in your journey propelled you to, okay, let me not just be a recipient of healing and growth and journeying, but also being able to give that.
So this is it was a big decision, because I was on shluchas, running the friendship circle, running our chabados, and it had always been a slog for me. It wasn't an easy journey for me. Again, some of what we were talking about, but I had envisioned that I was always going to be a number two. I was going to work for somebody, going to work in somebody's chabad house, and that's going to be my life. Every time I worked for somebody, didn't work out so well. Didn't work out so well. It worked out. It's just like I was always fetching about working for somebody, and suddenly I fell into this, and for years I was in this journey, and this responsibility, and it was too much. And I tried many times to leave, and the Abishter sent me back every single time. That's how I know that, at least for now, I'm in the right
You
place.
gotta be in it
Um,
must be the right place.
like literally, I'm not exaggerating how many times.
I'm privy to some of it, so
Yeah.
yeah.
And interestingly enough, when we found the house that we're in, which had a whole bunch of miracles around it, that was I was like, okay, I'm done. I can't live, living in the most expensive community in the world and moving. So I was like, okay, either we find a place, and I was like, okay, we'll take a risk. Once sometimes you get hit against the wall that you're like, I'm willing to do crazy things.
Yeah.
So we bought a house. Not that I had any money, but it all worked out. Some person showed up with half the down payment. So suddenly I'm in. I think that's also part of when everything crashed, all of it crashed at the same time. That was another thing, is that I've now put down roots here, and it was just always a struggle for me. And so I said to myself, you know what? I love what I'm doing, but it's painful. I need to be doing something that I love that's not painful. And as I'm being more at peace with myself, I need to be able to be there to give back to what was given to me, to say, I have a part of my day where I'm holding space for others and sharing the growth that I've had, and not keeping it exclusively for myself, but sharing it and saying, if there's something that you can, part of why I'm doing this podcast as well is the same thing, is that if there's something somebody else can learn from my journey, and that makes me the happiest person in the world, is that my suffering wasn't for no reason. It's that it helped me transform. And so, so I remember struggling with it for a while. Should I do it? Should I not? Should I do it? Should I not? And
this is going to school.
Yeah. And the opportunity presented itself, and it was the ability to do it from where I am. And I said, you know what, I'm doing this. I don't know where I'm going to end up afterwards. And I did it, and it was great. And did I think that I'd still be doing my shlichus and this? I did not expect it to be both. But the positive thing is, it's forced me to be able to hire people to do parts of my shlichus that I never needed to do in the first place. And I don't need to be, dealing with all the little tedious stuff. I can hire a guy for all I matter. It doesn't make a difference. Somebody can run a lot of those things so that I can focus on the real core of what a shliach needs to be. Whether it's a shliach as a therapist, or whether it's a shliach in counseling Jews, it's the real core is, I can be here as a support for somebody else.
Let's shift a little bit to now. So you had mentioned before that you work with people who are struggling with sexual identity. What's that kind of work? How do you relate to it? And what do you think is the main work in this field?
So I'll get back to that in a second, but
sure.
I don't just work with that. I don't have an exclusive.
I only do work with.
So I'll say it like this: is that the core of what, if you were to summarize what do I work with? I work with people working and developing themselves, growing as an individual, embracing yourself. Who are the clients that I'm working with? Some people with same-sex attraction, some people with sexual addictions, some people with anxiety, grief. Those are the main areas that I've been working in. But it all comes back to that same piece, and is all of these things is a space of self-acceptance. There's different types of grief. There's younger grief, and there's grief when somebody's 80 years old and is 60 years old and their parent dies. That's a different type of grief. That's not about self-acceptance, but it is about acceptance of your life and your situation. And that's where I find the.
So really, as a pun maybe, but what are we doing as therapists? The truth is that we really just need to teach people 2 words: accept yourself.
Yeah.
That there used to be, I think.
What's the Bob? Somebody
stop it, right?
Yeah.
But it's just accept yourself.
Yeah,
There's more to that.
There's more to it than that, but
That's the core.
That's the core. Is that when you can be okay with yourself as you are, then the rest of it falls into place. So I want to go back to, I started mentioning about somatic therapy. One of the things that I found very very healing is getting to a place. Let's take a step back. So our bodies store trauma, whether it's the loss of a parent, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's self-worth, whatever it is, our bodies absorb that trauma. And if we let it go, then we're good. If we hold on to it, like many of us do, then it just festers. Talk therapy, which I do talk therapy as well. Talk therapy is great because it highlights what are we dealing with, and it on a simple level, it heals the immediate pain, or doesn't heal, but it helps you bring out whatever you're dealing with to the light, and you can be like, oh, somebody understands me. I feel connected. I feel supported. For me and for many people, that only took me so far. And the struggles around anxiety, self-worth, a lot of these things were still there. So Rappoport is how I ended up meeting this somatic therapist. And I didn't even go to him for somatic therapy. But this is the area he worked in. And he told me when I met with him, somebody had referred me to him, and he says, I'm sorry, I can't help you with what you came to me for. And I was like, wait, this is, this was, you were supposed to be Mashiach from that area. But we ended up talking, and I was like, this guy's great. Because we didn't even talk about issues. We just went straight into my body. And we, how are you feeling? Where are you holding on to it? What stories are coming up? All of this stuff that we spoke about in this the past hour or so, all of that was stored in my body. And he allowed the process allowed my body to speak, not my mind, my body to speak, and to share. Oh, I'm remembering the loss of my mother and how that impacted my life. I'm remembering all those things. I can grieve that. My body can grieve that. And I found that somatic therapy has been, there's not one thing. I believe healing is a cocktail of different stages and different process. But for me, that has been the most recent, most impactful piece, is letting my body heal, and letting it talk, and letting it cry, and letting it share its experience.
I like to think of it in again, using the terms of Hasidus that we know. Chachma, like the initial idea, is the beginning of psychoeducation. Hey, this is what's been going on for you, and this is what's happening. And in Bina is when you've really done therapy, talk therapy potentially, probably in the beginning very much so, that you really understand, that your mind understands, wow, this is what happened for me. This is the scenarios that bring me, and these are my defense mechanisms, and this is how I react out of trigger points and so on. You know it all. But it's not, like you said, the body keeps the score if we want, or when the body says no, like Arvog Mate or Bessel van der Kolk. Like, this is where we understand today the body also holds on. Yeah. And there's the das part, where it's not something that you think about, but it's the experiential level. And to get to that experiential level, talk therapy probably at some point, you can do it to the mind as well. We're not excluding it, but there are other ways of having to reach that stage where my body knows what's going on. Yeah. And that's the das stage. So it could be somatic. There's also, some people use psychedelics sometimes to get into that stage. But any of the stages, and that you triggered that thought for me when you said stages, because the people that go out there and say, oh, talk therapy is not good because it doesn't talk to the body, like, you can't also talk to the body before. Right. There's the concepts.
It couldn't have happened a day earlier.
Exactly. So there's stages, and they all have to be traversed. Bringing this to you, today, do you practice somatic experiencing or a somatic therapy with your clients?
So a little bit. I the way I work with my clients is I'm, what's the Chassidim, you've heard the Chabakuk, their Chabad, Breslev cook, their mix of everything.
I never heard that, but I like it.
Yeah. So I think that's my style as a therapist.
You mean you have many tools in your basket?
Many tools in my basket. I'm not, I'm not an expert in any one specific area, but we'll start off with talking. We'll see. Sometimes we'll do IFS work. Sometimes we'll do somatic work. Sometimes I'll tell the person, maybe you can benefit from EMDR or medication. Those are areas that I'm not.
Not me.
They're not that I can't support them, and they can go do that and come back, or they can go and. So I kind of do a little bit of everything, and I think the main thing that for most of the clients is that they can feel a safe space. That, you know what, I'm here, I'm going to be heard, I'm going to be supported, and I'm going to know that I'm not alone, and then we'll see where we go next.
Yeah, I want to continue this conversation forever. But I think you need to catch a flight at some point, and I need to go see some clients too. But I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. And first of all, before I ask you this question, because we're good with the time?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, did I miss anything? Yeah.
There's just one thing that I loved that that the somatic therapist taught me, which I think it's huge, is the word titration. Titration, are you familiar with it?
No.
So titration is a concept. I don't know if it originates in the science lab or not, but you can have two chemicals that, and I don't know offhand what chemicals that if you put them together will cause an explosion. But if you take like a little dropper and you take a little tiny bit and you put it into the other chemical, you'll hear it, and then it'll fizzle out. And then you do it again. And over time, you can get all of the one chemical into the other one without the explosion. And that's what healing really is. Because when you begin a healing journey, I need it to be today. I need to be healed right now.
I can't stand this feeling.
I can't stand this feeling. And he told me, he's like, Ezzy, you're just going to have to titrate little by little. It's going to be 1 week after another week after another week. And then you'll look back and you'll be like, wow, look how far I've come. And it's so true. And if you go into healing with the mindset of, I know that I want this yesterday, but I'm going to look back little by little by little. It's a huge piece of the healing process.
And I want to just say for the realness, when you ask me, hey, do you know what titration means? Part of me wanted to so desperately say, yeah, sure, I know. But it's big work for me to say, no, I don't. Actually, tell me, teach me. And this is the reason why I do this podcast, to really learn. Like I had so much in this conversation that was really helpful. I want to ask you a couple maybe closing questions. Did we cover, is there anything else you think we should cover or not cover? Or
I think the one thing I'll cover is that there's always more. There's, you're hearing a little piece of my story today. There's more that I'm not putting, I'm not opening up my book, and I think in many ways I am an open book, but I'm not, spilling my guts out on the street. But to realize that whatever growth that I've had, there's more that I'm still working through.
Meaning, if you do things right, if you look back in 5 years, like, whoa, I was so unaware 5 years ago.
But even right now, I'm still, I'm not the healed wounder, the healed healer. I'm the wounded healer. I have a life. I'm a human being. I have my struggles like everybody else. And even with all the work, I still have my struggles.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. But it's also okay to realize, I'm saying this for your listeners, is that it's okay to realize that somebody may be the big macher in town, and they're also struggling, and they're also growing. And as long as we're growing, as long as we continue on this path of looking towards where we're headed, we're good.
Right. And maybe also stop the illusion of perfection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You're on the most world famous podcast. You have millions of listeners here, so you have a message. If you had the chance to share one message, one point, one idea that you really felt shaped and changed your life, but that can be helpful for someone else to maybe adapt in a way of looking. And I think we might have covered some of this message already, but I'm curious how you'd say, what would be your message?
Oh, I hadn't planned this.
No, this is the point. No planning.
The first thing that comes up to mind when you say, is that work hard to find what that core wound is and nurture it. For me, that's just what comes up. I don't know that if I had an hour to process it that I would say this, but what comes up for me is that the biggest piece of healing for me was I knew my mother's death was monumental, but I didn't know where to go with that. And I remember going to I went to Fresh Start.
Shout out, we love Fresh Start.
So I went to Fresh Start, and the facilitator, the therapist was facilitating. I said, okay, I wanted to deal with something else other than my mother, and he says, and that's where we're going to begin. And I was like, so upset about it. But
because you at that time felt like I passed it.
I was like, okay, I've done my work. Let's talk about other things.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that wound was still there, and if I, healing that wound, and I think it's very apropos again that we're doing this on my mother's yard site, is that wound will always be there, but keep nurturing it. Keep looking at it in a way of how can, one of the things that's more recent in my journey was tapping into what I didn't get as a 7-year-old, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 12-year-old. A child comes home and their mother sits there and they scrape their knee and they're bleeding, and their mother says she can't fix it, but she says, "I'm sorry, Zizkeit. Sorry you're struggling, and I'm here with you." I didn't know how to do that to myself, but I know how to do that now.
Self-soothe.
But that goes back to the core wound, and nurture that core wound.
I love that.
And that's the what comes to mind.
What about a habit that you adopted that really maybe created a good structure in your life, or is a very anchoring point in your life? You feel like that's a habit. If I could tell people, do that, and that will make a big difference in your life.
I like writing, just for myself. Just
journaling.
Not even journaling. Just sitting there, sitting there at the end of the day, and I use notes on my phone, and I just type and say whatever you want. Just let it out. I enjoy that. I enjoy.
How is that different than thinking about it?
It's not. It's just I'm not as good as part of the struggle of being, which again I'm much better at. Being is the same thing, and just sitting and letting your mind do the reflection. For me, I find that
I was going to lead you on to hope that you were going to go somewhere else. I believe that when you journal, you actually take it from the scramble of the brain that just does loops and is so fast that when you have to put it into an actual
okay, yeah, I've heard that. But for me, it's more that as I write it, it's just it's letting my subconscious do the talking, and then I look back at it, and so that's a habit.
Beautiful.
Just
what about letting go of a limiting belief, like a belief that you held on to that.
Oh, the belief that everybody else has it worked out. That's for sure. My biggest belief is like, oh yeah, Slimy's got it all worked out.
Yeah, look, he has an office.
He has an office. He has a podcast.
Yeah, the illusion. Basically, letting go of the illusion that everybody else has it right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow. Ezzy, this has been a pleasure. I feel like we just started.
I'm happy. I love this.
We're going for 2 hours, but we really just started.
Oh, gosh.
And I really think there's going to be a second one, God willing. But thank you for sharing yourself. You're so vulnerably and so open. And whatever of this podcast you do want to publish, I think the world will definitely gain and appreciate, and whatever not will beautifully cut out so no one will ever know.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank
When you asked me to talk, I was like, I don't know where we're gonna go and what I'm gonna be comfortable with, but
It was okay, mostly.
mostly, yeah.
Okay, good.
All right. Thank you, Shlomi.
Thank you.